Hello everyone and happy Wednesday. I hope that you are doing well. My name is Beth Staniforth Seamster and I am the Children's Ministry Coordinator at Whitewater Area Regional Ministry in Whitewater, Wisconsin. I'm here today doing our Wednesday children's message. As you know, if you participate, on a normal non-COVID year, we would get together on Wednesdays. Our kids ages 4th through 5th grade would be welcome to join us at Promise Point Wednesday evenings from about 3:15 to 5:15. Then we would have dinner together with our middle schoolers, Team Jesus drumming with Mrs. Hayes, and at 6:30, our 6th and 7th graders would join me for middle school youth group from 6:30 to 8. Unfortunately, this year that's not happening. We need to be safe, we need to keep ourselves safe, and we need to keep each other safe. So instead, I'm taking the curriculum that we would have done and creating it for families. This way, as a whole family, you can watch the video and do a few activities. And if you are looking at this video, there should be a link below that has our website, the Google Docs page with the lesson plan. So you can go from there. Anyways, today's witness is a woman by the name of Saint Genevieve. She is the patron saint of Paris. So if you remember, we started with the question, who was Jesus and why do we follow him? Then the next week we talked about Paul, the Apostle Paul, as a witness. The week after we talked about Lydia from the book of Acts. This week, Saint Genevieve. So in order to be one of our witnesses that we are talking about this year, you have to be a person who has loved God and who has loved God's people, who've shown God's love in the world. Well, Saint Genevieve was born in the year 422. We are now in the year 2020. It was a long time ago, right? So we might look at her and say, what could she have to teach us today? You know, how can her life of witness even begin to apply to our lives today? But let me tell you a little bit about her, and then we can have that discussion some more. So she was born in France, and when she was just 7 years old, another gentleman, another Christian, Saint Germanus, was coming through her town on his way to Britain. And he stopped and was preaching, and he saw her, and at 7 years old, he went over to her, and he asked if she would like to dedicate her life to God, and she said yes. So he laid hands on her and blessed her. And it's something that she was then faithful to. So for the rest of her life, she served God. At the age of 15, she made the decision that she would not marry, that she would remain a virgin for her whole life, and that she would give generously to the poor and serve God in that way. So when she was older, probably late teens, early 20s, the Franks were invading. They were invading Paris, and the city was starving. And Genevieve rescued the city from starvation. She rescued the city from starvation by leading a group of ships down the river to obtain food. And what we learn when we study that is that she actually had to perform a miracle to get the food back safely. The ships were being so tossed about by the wind. They were all over the place. The grain was tipping over the sides. It was getting very scary, potentially life-threatening. The ships were filling with water. And Genevieve stretched out her hand towards heaven and asked Christ to save them. And he did. Immediately, it says immediately the ships were righted and they made it home safely. So they saved 11 grain-laden ships. So 11 ships full of grain. That is a lot of grain. If you think about a city that's starving, that doesn't have enough, to come in with that much would truly be a blessing to the people. And it says that when she returned, her biggest concern was making sure that the people who needed the food the most got it, which means she wasn't concerned about taking it to the royal family or taking it to the very wealthy and important. She knew they would get what they needed. Her concern were people who were poor, who were sick, who were elderly, people who didn't have anyone to help them get food. And so the women that she worked with would talk about, they would have loaves of bread in the oven. And when they would go to take them out, half of the bread might be missing because Genevieve had already gone in just a minute earlier and taken half of it. And then they would say, we didn't really know what was happening with it, but then we'd walk around the city and we would see the poorest people with these loaves of bread. So they figured out that what she was doing was taking the bread a little early and then distributing it around the city to those most in need. Later on, there was another time that Paris was under attack from Attila the Hun. He was marching his army across Europe, and Paris was set to be their next place, their next stop. And so she had this vision from God. And as the city is starting to panic, as people are thinking, oh my gosh, we have to pack up a cart and get out of here right away, because when they come in, they'll kill us. They'll steal our stuff. They'll kill us. They'll take us as hostages. Genevieve stood in the middle of the crowd and said, no, I've had a vision. We all need to get down on our knees right now. We need to fast and pray. And the people took a chance. And it was a chance. They decided to trust her. And as a city, the people came together in prayer and fasting, which means that they didn't eat. And even though it says that they could feel the army like marching, they could feel the vibrations on the ground as they were kneeling and praying, they stayed faithful. They continued to pray, and they trusted Saint Genevieve in her vision from God. And they saved the city. Attila and his army turned and went south. She died around the year 520 and is buried. She's buried in France, and she is known as the Saint of Paris. So the city of Paris looks to her as a saint. So we see that in her life, she has some miracles that she performed. And I want to draw some attention back to this picture of her that I was showing you in the beginning. So this is a picture of what she may have looked like. It's a portrait, but oftentimes Saint Genevieve is shown with a loaf of bread and a candle, one or both of those images when people paint her. And the reason is for the bread, because of her care and desire to help the most vulnerable, to reach out to those who were the neediest, who needed things the most, making sure they had enough to eat. This one here I found interesting. I did a little research about why the candle. So there's some legend around Saint Genevieve. We don't really know the whole story, of course, but she used to go to a church, to a little chapel, to pray in the evenings, and she would have to carry a candle to light her path. Now, one legend says that the devil used to come and try to blow out the candle as she was walking to keep her from going to pray, because her prayer life was so strong, and she and God had such a great communication. But every time the devil would try to blow out the candle, it wouldn't work. So she always was able to make it to the chapel for prayer. The other legend is that while she was praying, the candle would blow out. Drafts of air, it would blow out, and then it would relight, so that she always was able to finish her prayer time. In our activities this week, I actually list 2 potential activities. You could do one, you could do both, you could do nothing, just watch the video and have a discussion. The first, I think it's actually activity 2, is baking bread. I am not a baker, but if you are a baker, I know some of our families are really great cooks and great bakers, you could try baking bread together as a family. And oftentimes when you bake bread, it has you dividing the dough into 2 parts. So you could have one for your family, and then you could give one to another family, to friends or someone you know that maybe needs a little extra support. So that way you'd be sharing Saint Genevieve's spirit, right? Her generosity. The other activity has to do with the candle. When I was in my early 20s, I lived in a community, and every night around dinner, we prayed together. We'd eat dinner, then we'd stay at the table, we'd light a candle in the middle of the table, and we'd pass the candle around. It would sit on the table, and we would just slide it around. And every person would take the candle and share what they needed to pray for. And then at the end, we would pray all together. It was really a beautiful ritual. And since Saint Genevieve is so big on prayer and is pictured and has these miracles with the candles, it seemed like a perfect thing to encourage you to do this week. So that could be another activity. If you don't have a candle, or if maybe your kids are too young to use one, like mine, you could use a flashlight, or you could just use an object, something that reminds you of light, bringing light into the darkness. Now, I encourage you to do this as much as you'd like. Potentially, you could do it every night of the week this week. And then every night you could, as a family, you could each do your own individual prayers, and then you could think of a group of people who's perhaps struggling a little bit. For instance, teachers who are having to do everything virtually this year. And so together as a family, you could ask yourself the question, if I was a teacher, what would I need? If I was a teacher this year, what sorts of things would I be worried about? What would I need? And you could think about that, and then you could offer those prayers to God. So I listed a few different ideas, but I encourage you to really be creative as a family and think about ways that we can support and uphold one another. And that brings me to my last point. I'm actually at First UMC in what's sometimes known as the preschool room. It's the room next to the office on the first floor. And you can see that behind me, there's a whole host of goodies and apples and treats and all sorts of stuff. Every Tuesday and Thursday night this fall, instead of our traditional Tuesday lunch that we have done for college students in the past, we are doing a meal ministry. Terry Peranto, or Mama P, as some of you know her, has been baking meals, and people can come pick up 2 to 3 frozen meals, goodies, and all sorts of things so that they will have enough to eat. So this week, regardless of what you do, I invite you to think about St. Genevieve, her example, her generosity, and think about how you can embody that as you go forward, and how those actions, the love of God that she had and the way that she loved her neighbor, that changed her world, and how we could change our world today if we do those same things. Thank you, and blessings.